Boy, we left Yellowstone off in a very tumultuous place. Where can you tease that we pick up with the series?
You know, yeah, Yellowstone definitely kind of it was it different, right, than seasons one and seasons two. So I think that was what was really exciting about, this last season. But going into um season four, I think you're going to see a lot of redemption. I think that there's every party kind of has their own battle that they're dealing with. And I think what you're going to see, especially as we kick off here pretty soon, what is this, like 3 weeks, November 7th, right? We're going to see a lot of this kind of come to a head. A lot of the kind of frustration and anger, a lot of people are wondering like what is going on with Jamie, and as it pertains to the family. So I think the best way to kind of tease it is you're going to see a lot of redemption, and a lot of anger. This is it's a very aggressive season. But I think it's really exciting because I think all of our amazing fans are going to really kind of start this show off with like this has made it worth the wait.
And where do we pick up with Colby? Still working at the Dutton Ranch?
Yeah, he's at the ranch. Obviously we all know he's been branded. And so that was for some people it's bittersweet because they're like, we're happy. I think what's really interesting is, for a lot of people, they were a little bit bittersweet to see Colby get branded because it was kind of like him kind of going over to the dark side, if you will. But I think I would honestly say that, he's still relatively innocent, even though he might have a little blood on his hands. But, he's still, he's at the ranch. But I think it's really interesting this year because, so many like of the characters in this bunkhouse this year are all kind of having to do things that were different than seasons 1 through 3. And so I think that, we still have a lot of the playful, poker and, kind of just drinking and partying and X, Y, and Z. But a lot of this is going to take on a different tone for a lot of people, including, Colby.
Where do we stand between Colby and Teeter then? He protected her last season and they had a moment together.
Yeah, Colby is, he's a shy guy. So, we did have a moment. I guess it was a little bit longer than a moment, but it was definitely a moment. And so I think what's really fun is that this year we're really going to be navigating what does that even mean? We've seen different relationships. I guess I use that very loosely as it pertains to Yellowstone relationships. But, with different women in the bunkhouse, like we've seen with Jimmy's character, who's had love interest kind of coming in and out, so we don't really know that having a relationship in the bunkhouse is necessarily beneficial for either party because usually someone's gone. So it's going to be really fun to kind of navigate that this next season with the audience, and kind of allow them to, do what they do best, which is come up with their own conclusions, which I think is sometimes more fascinating than watching the actual show.
Well, the stunt work on the series is absolutely phenomenal. Talk about the prep that goes into each season.
Oh man, I think we probably have some of the best stunt coordinators in the game. Just bar none. We, it's funny because before you watch movies, you watch TV shows, especially as a younger child, and you're like, oh, I just want to do that and I want to do that, but you don't realize that you're not doing it one time. Sometimes you're doing it like 20 times or 50 times, or it's hot and it's rainy and it's snowy. And so you really have such a different appreciation for the stunt men and the stunt women that are on this show, especially because we're dealing with live animals. And so, we have just amazing people, like Jason Rodriguez, who's kind of like our head stunt coordinator. who really just kind of takes everyone under, under his wing and kind of pulls them in close, and is so very patient because, for me, it's like, this is what they do for a living, and this is not what we do for a living. Really patient they have to do with all of us. But the one great thing about this show is, as intense, physically demanding as it can be, and as intense as it can be, we're all so safe because of just what they've done. The work and the prep. We go in a day before, a week before, and we don't, put anything, on camera until all parties included feel, safe and ready to go. So that really is just kind of a testimony to not only, Taylor and the team that he's put together, but also just the amazing actors that are also able to work pretty seamlessly with our stunt coordinators. So it really is kind of a blessing.
Well, I know that you primarily work with the guys in the bunkhouse, but was there someone in particular you were hoping from this season to get a chance to work with more?
Yeah, it's really kind of funny because, our usual kind of day to day is with, like, all of us in the bunkhouse, just the Ryans and the Jimmys and, the Teeters. And so this year, we definitely got to do some more work, with Rip, who's obviously played by Cole Hauser. And so that was fun. We definitely got to do some more scenes with Kevin. And that was always, it's always fun because usually conversations, or I guess I would say whenever I'm having conversations with Kevin, usually it's in between a scene, while one of our scenes is wrapping up and, kind of in transition, but very rarely, with dialogue or even being kind of in the same vicinity, just because we have so many different worlds going on. And I think that's kind of the ascension this year, with a lot of us in the bunkhouse, is kind of not being just in the bunkhouse, but also like having to go out into the world and kind of have to deal with some of these other very interesting characters that come into our universe. So I think that's always fun. And of course, you always get a great acting class anytime you get to be in, rooms and in scenes, with the likes of, Cole Hauser and Kevin.
What was your first reaction then when you started reading, script number 1 for season 4?
It was, I think our reaction honestly was like so much relief. We were just so excited to just get back to shooting, especially after there's just so much kind of uncertainty. And so I think this year, more than any season, it was just like, we really realized like how grateful we were to be able to be a part of this type of show. And like we always say in anyone that we speak to, it's like, the first season, you don't really know what to expect or what how the audience is going to receive it. And then season 2, you're like, okay, they kind of like
we got our stride.
And then by the third one, you're like, oh, like it's a real thing. Like it's now like a thing. It goes from like a show to a thing in whatever way that you want to put a thing to be. But season 4 going into it, I think we all kind of just realized not only like how fortunate we were, but the kind of responsibility to really just dive into these characters. And I think the one great thing about Taylor is that he really has emboldened us to just really take, for all intents and purposes, to really take these characters by the reins and really just, get after it. He's given us so much leeway, and he writes such phenomenal characters that makes it really interesting and fun. So I think my first reaction just reading episode 4 was like, oh, this is different. Like usually what you're going to see in this first episode is usually what you would expect at like a season finale, or even sometimes a series finale. You would never think like we're going to open up, like there's one and then there's others to come out after, and because the cliffhanger, and because so many people have just been waiting, because our shooting times were a little bit different this year, and slot times were a little bit different. So people have really been kind of like, okay, like whatever we were waiting for, please like let it come and like punch us in the face. And I think that they did deliver with this first episode of season 4.
I mean, that scene last season where you guys, you and Teeter are obviously freezing, was probably one of my most memorable moments from that season.
Mm.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you how or what it was like, I should say, filming that particular moment.
You know, it was something, all season. I think we probably found out about that scene maybe like 3 episodes maybe before. And I remember, I think it was episode 8 when I read the script and I was like, okay, now Colby's in the water and he's getting stumbled by horses, and then Colby doesn't breathe. And I remember like I also didn't breathe. So it was like Denim didn't breathe as well as Colby didn't breathe, because I was like, well, this is it. And I was like getting texts from some of the other actors, and they're like, man, like blowing up Taylor's phone. And then finally Jen called me and said, I just talked to Taylor. He said, we don't die. Like, take a breath. And I was like, okay, cool. Now I can actually read the scene to see actually what it was. So, going into it, it was amazing because we had Stephen K, who's an executive producer, but also, the director, and his wife comes on in this season as well, which is awesome. But, the great thing was like, it was super cold, very, very cold. The water was very real. It's not stunt water, it's not fake water. It's not stunt water. It was very real water. It was very cold and very dark. But, honestly, for me, it was something like I had like maybe 2 weeks where I have to like mentally prepare myself, because you go in, and I think for me in those moments, you're like, this is why you wanted to be an artist. You wanted to have this opportunity to kind of have these really submersive experiences where you're not
No
really
pun
acting
intended.
anymore. You're right. No, exactly. That this is, by the end of this interview, you'll have a book of puns. But you really are looking at it and you're like, you don't really have to act. You just have to kind of like be an experience, and then hopefully you remember your lines. But Jen is such an amazing artist that she just goes feet first, literally, right? And just kind of watching her just accept the reality that we're in, it really kind of just allowed me to just also be like, you know what, let's just get after it. And Stephen K just made us feel so comfortable and was like, look, whatever you want to do, do it. If not, and I'm like, look, we're only going to do this thing. Well, of course you think one time, but it turns out to be like, 10 or 12 times. But it's really exciting. And honestly, it was very physically and emotionally kind of demanding, but man, it was so rewarding. Like afterwards, you're wrapped up and you're like, man, like we actually did that. And that's going to be so exciting. And then of course, you wait like 7 months before anybody can actually see it. So you can't really tell anybody about like how excited you were to do this. And if you do, by the time it comes, you're like, what were you talking about again? You're like, doesn't matter, guys. But it was so amazing. I have to give it to Jen, just to be in that water, in the very cold mountains of Utah. What was this, like in November? So if anyone has ever had the opportunity to go to Utah in November, it's not exactly summer. So I'm glad that, the audience really received it well. But man, and having the track with Ryan Bingham over it and all these other things, I mean, it really was like a very, very beautiful moment to be captured on screen. So I'm happy to have been able to be a part of that.
Well, we all know that every episode of Yellowstone just gets better and better, and it's more intense, and it's just every episode is on your edge of your seat. And I know that episode 1 is going to be something, season 4, that people desperately need to watch. But are there any other episodes that you feel are really stand out, without spoiling what happens, but maybe give an eye out for where our audience should really be focused?
Honestly, I think, Yellowstone's a very interesting series in that, some TV shows you can kind of like miss an episode, here or there, and then kind of like pop back in.
Right.
You're like, all right, they were, when I left them, they were at the dinner table, and now I came back to them, and now they're getting up from the dinner. There's not a lot, but man, I'm telling you, because we don't do 10 or 16 episodes, so Taylor really kind of like jam packs this thing. It's like, imagine taking a jar and at a harvest and like packing as much food in this jar as you possibly can, for the winter, so that there's like barely any air, right, to breathe. And I really like Taylor did that with pretty much every episode. and I say that because we have so many characters that kind of come in, but so the characters that come in, you're like, where did you come from? And sometimes if you even get up to grab some chips from the refrigerator, you're like, wait, hold on. It's like, where did he say he came from? So this is one of those things where I'm just like, look, guys, just buckle down. It's an hour and 10 minutes. It's 5% of your day. Just get all of the things that you need, sit down, enjoy. Because I think that this season, especially, there's so much action. Like, I think Taylor really set everything up, whereas like season 3, it gave the audience an opportunity to kind of get emotionally engaged and emotionally attached to the characters. And I think now in season, like, very, very real for a lot of people, because a lot of the characters have real consequences. It's not just, dialogue. And that's why I would say, like, this first episode, don't be 30 seconds late. Just be there beforehand. So that you don't miss the teasers, don't miss anything. It's really just that good of a season this year. And so I wouldn't want anyone to be like, wait a second, the person was alive, I swallowed, and now he's dead, but I didn't see where there's a bullet or anything. So just, keep your eyes open, tape your eyes wide open.
This show has become iconic, really. What does it mean to you to be a part of such a successful, sort of really applauded by the critics series?
Honestly, it is kind of surreal. Every time I look back, I do, so much reflection. And, I look back to like 2017, it feels like I think when we started, maybe, and getting the call to be a part of this show. And, of course, you're super excited to, be on a show where there's Kevin and there's Taylor and then you're like, okay, now you're doing it. But then you don't realize, like, that into a first season of a show, because you're like, you don't really have anything to, people are like, oh, it's kind of like Dallas and it's kind of like this, but it's really not like any of those things.
Right.
When you really kind of boil down to it. And so kind of going on through the seasons and, sitting around, and one of the great things with our actors is that we really are friends. When we're filming, we're talking and chopping it up, in between scenes, but then afterwards, we going, getting dinner together, going and, having being around a fire pit and just talking. And we all like to reflect. And it's really, we're so grateful that Taylor selected us to be able to be a part of it. But also, like, the audience really wrapped its hands around this thing. Like, they really have taken to it. It's really penetrated so many people. And what's really interesting with this show is you would think that it wouldn't be very successful if you're just looking based off of demographics, like on the East Coast or on the West Coast, just based off of kind of, for people in California, people really are enjoying this show, like, all over the place. And, and I'm now getting people, they're in Canada, and the places in the UK, because I think some of those places, like, they're on season 2. So they're always like, please don't ruin it. Please don't, but it's such an amazing opportunity to be a part of something like this. And as an artist, and that opportunity to be a part of this type of legs is very rare. It doesn't happen very often. You maybe get on something for a couple seasons and it's good, but sometimes it's not always great. And this has had the opportunity to really be great and to be responded and have the type of response that we've had. I mean, I still, even my family's just like, they still are, they're kind of aghast, by it. But, that's just a testimony to Taylor Sheridan and every amazing person that, Viacom and at Paramount that really just trusted him. And he's he's delivered for sure. So it's a blessing to be a part of it.
Have you been busy working then on any other projects recently?
Yeah, so I did, I think I just finished maybe like 6 weeks ago. I just did two films. I think it was like I don't know what they're called. Was it like a sequel? And then what's the third thing to a sequel? I don't know. I know a prequel's
Trilogy.
the first. Oh, okay, two installments of a with Tom Wopat, or whatever, who obviously everyone people would obviously know him from back in the days, right? Way back in the days. Or whatever. I got to play something a little bit different than a ranch hand, where I was playing a sheriff. And so that's going to be really fun and exciting for, our audience to be able to see. I think it'll come out. The second movie will come out in 2022, which they're still figuring out the dates and all that stuff. But I know it'll come out this next year. So that was really exciting to be able to do. And then other than that, just really kind of been taking it easy and just preparing. The great thing about Yellowstone is because it is very physically demanding. You're like, by the time you go and do anything else, you're like, I'm kind of out of gas. Like, so you really have an opportunity, to take a little break and, just get some fresh air and just kind of relax. But, these last two movies were real different, obviously, from Yellowstone coming right out of it. So I'm really looking forward to our audience, Colby as a sheriff, because they don't really know me as Denim. They just know me as Colby. And then I happen to be a representation of Colby. My name happens to be Denim. So